Welcome to Investigation. I am your host, Hatter, along with my co-host.
Scoot.
And this is part 2 of the German Coast Uprising. In the last part, I talked about the Louisiana sugar plantations and basically the treatment of the enslaved that were there. I talked about how the uprising started, and we kind of went through and got to the point where now there's like armed militias starting to come back against the rebellion. And that's where we're going to kick it off here. If you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to it now, because otherwise what I'm going to talk about isn't really going to make any sense. So, now, moving on. So, like I said, we just talked about how there was armed forces starting to move against the rebellion. Now, at this point also, that people, like plantation owners, were starting to fear that the rebellion was intending to capture New Orleans. Because remember, this was only 7 years after Haiti became independent. And that all started because of a rebellion coming up. The idea of enslaved people taking control of a city was no longer a fantasy.
A possible reality.
Yeah, it was a possible reality. Haiti already happened. So now families started... my lip ring... The ball to my lip ring just fell down my boobs. I think. I told you it wasn't in there well.
You did.
I said I'm gonna lose it.
It's either in your boobs or on the blanket.
Anyways.
Well, alright.
I'll figure that out later. So, families started fleeing. Historical depictions note that plantation families specifically started fleeing their homes, but some of them did just seek protection, and some of them even armed themselves. Some others would move their women and children away from the plantations, and this is all because the planners feared house attacks, fires, and just a loss of control.
Yeah.
Commodore John Shaw feared the revolt might spread and wrote, if the rebels succeed, quote, the whole coast would exhibit a general sense of devastation, end quote. Now, a lot of these quotes also, you have to remember, they're not coming from the enslaved people. They're coming from the white people.
Yeah, the owners, the plantation people.
So they're painting it as a way different picture than it actually was.
Yeah.
Governor William C.C. Caliborn immediately responded. Local militia, planners, federal troops, volunteer forces all mobilized quickly, which in and of itself kind of shows the fear that they were facing. But they also did get a little bit of a heads up because, like I said, Manuel Andre escaped. So he went and he warned people that this was coming. And overall, though, the authorities did not treat it as a small disturbance. Charles Perret, a militia participant, described discovering the rebels and attacking them near Burnaby Plantation. And at this point, he estimated that roughly 200 men, some even mounted on horses, were moving together through this area. All in all, though, the German Coast Uprising only lasted about 2 days as an active march.
2 days?
2 days.
See, I expected this was like some week-long thing. 2 days?
2 days.
Okay.
But the aftermath, so the pursuit, the trials, and executions continued for weeks.
Okay.
On January 10th, militia and planner forces intercepted the rebels. Firearms and cavalry gave authorities an overwhelming advantage. Many of the rebels died during this fight. Some did flee and escaped into the swamps and forests of the area. Despite the scale of the uprising, the number of people killed by the rebels remained surprisingly small. Historical accounts pretty much only identify the 2 deaths being Gilbert and Andre during the opening attack on the Andre plantation, and planner Francois Tropinier, and he was killed later during the march. Property damage proved more extensive than fatalities, as plantation buildings, crops, and homes were burned or damaged while the rebels moved toward New Orleans. I know I said New Orleans the entire time I did my Manchac Swamp. Every time I said New Orleans.
Yeah,
I know.
I did want to correct you.
I caught it while I was editing it, and I was like, people are going to be so mad at me.
Yeah, you started saying it. I was like, oh, I don't want to have to correct her at this point.
Yeah, it's just that.
You're not from there. You don't know.
Right. I was raised in New York. It's just all of us say New Orleans. And it's same with we always said Appalachian Mountains. And then, so it's like I'm trying to adapt and I'm trying to remember. But it's just how it was ingrained in me as a kid. That's how we say it up there. So I apologize. Don't yell at me. I fixed it.
I fixed it.
I fixed it. Now, the violence continued to escalate. Authorities hunted survivors for days, and people were trekked through cane fields, forests, swamps, but their capture often meant execution. The manhunt after the uprising is one of the darkest parts of the story because the rebellion was mostly broken by January 10th, like I said, but the violence continued afterward. Authorities shifted from stopping the march to tracking, capturing, and eliminating survivors. And a lot of the planters themselves joined the hunt. So it was not only soldiers, but it was militia, local planners, volunteer, and just territorial forces. Now, there are a few resources that did suggest some of the tracking methods included dogs for their pursuit operations, I guess. But the evidence of that is a little less direct, I guess. It's not as clear-cut.
Gotcha.
But there were dogs already being used elsewhere in slave patrol systems and fugitive hunts. So I think that might be what either they did or there might just be a little bit confusion because dogs were being used in other areas.
Yeah.
Now, remember, only 2 confirmed deaths came from plantation owners. In contrast, authorities ultimately killed approximately 95 enslaved people through battle, execution, and reprisals. The exact number is a little bit uncertain because basically a lot of the historians that are trying to piece together how this actually went down disagree on how many rebels there actually were. At peak strength, they estimate between 200 to 500. But even on that, not all of the deaths were recorded. So we don't really know. We know that at least 95 of them were killed, but we don't know because, like I said, the stories that were told are mostly coming from those of plantation owners and governmental forces.
From that side of things.
From that side of things. So one, you can already kind of doubt that the records are truthful. But then even on top of that, we don't know for sure how many people were even involved in it. If we use the highest estimate of the 500 participants, this would mean about 19% of them died, so roughly 1 in 5 rebels died. If we use the lower estimate of 200, that's 48%, so almost half of the participants were killed.
I mean, that's an astounding difference.
Right. I think sometimes it's even for me, when you read something and you're like, oh, 95 people died, that's tragic, but that's not as many as I would have expected. But when you really put it in perspective for that 95 would be almost half of them.
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh.
That's a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, 40 to 45 of them were killed during the battle or pursuit, but the rest of them were killed during the capture.
Okay.
The historical accounts of what happened to the captured rebels do exist, but like I said, it's not really a reliable source.
It's a little sketch.
Yes. And even within that, some of the details vary by those sources. The overall picture is that the reprisals were intended to be public, intimidating, and unforgettable. After capture, many rebels were executed following rapid tribunals rather than long, actually legal proceedings.
I see.
Mm-hmm. The most infamous detail involved what happened afterwards. Authorities decapitated some of the executed rebels. Their heads were placed on long poles along the Mississippi River Road, and some of these reports even describe the display extending for dozens of miles between the plantation districts towards New Orleans. So these are the literal poles with the decapitated heads on them that is stretching on for miles.
Of the rebels.
Of the enslaved
Yeah.
people that they the like planters and government of forces decapitated.
Yeah.
Now, they basically used this, I guess in their head, it was to serve as a deterrence so that enslaved people would see the consequences of a resistance.
Ew.
Yes.
It literally reminds me of, like, Dracula. He literally, like, put people on pikes, like, as a similar thing.
But it's Dracula. It's not...
Well, no, but I'm talking about the actual person.
Oh,
no,
right.
I'm talking about the actual, like, who Dracula was based off of. I can't think of his actual name off the top of my head.
That's why I was like...
What's his name?
I
have to now look, because I forget his actual name. But no, the actual person that he was based on. He's Vlad the Third.
Yes. Vlad the Impaler.
Yes, the Impaler. That's who I was thinking of, and
I think I was so confused.
And I said Dracula, but I meant Vlad the Impaler.
I was like, I know that some of the Dracula movies are dark, but I was like, I don't remember that happening. That was like, okay, I'm just gonna roll with it. No, but yeah, Vlad the Impaler.
That's who I was thinking of, which is who Dracula's based off of. And I couldn't think of the actual name of him.
It reminds me of Dracula. Okay. I was trying not to, like, discredit what you said, but I was so confused.
I had a point. I had a valid point.
Yes, 100%. We just got a little lost in the translation.
Yes. No, Vlad the Impaler.
Yes. Now, Charles Deslan's death was described as especially severe. Naval officer Samuel Hambleton later reported that Deslan was mutilated, shot, and killed without trial.
Why?
He was the leader.
Okay.
So it was like a symbol kind of thing. Literally, with the punishment intended as an example to others.
So I jumped ahead.
You did jump ahead. It's okay. Literally had that as a point. Now, after militia and planter forces dispersed the rebels, Charles Deslan escaped the initial fighting, but was eventually captured. Unlike many prisoners who faced tribunals, Deslan appears to have received no formal trial, and the punishment that followed became one of the most disturbing parts of the uprising. Naval officer Samuel Hambleton later recorded that Deslan was subjected to severe mutilation before death. According to the account, his hands were cut off, and he was repeatedly shot. And this is generally implied or referenced as having happened before he was dead.
Oh.
Right, so he was at least alive for part of it.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, so historians are trying to reconstruct these events from shorter, like, descriptions written by the observers of what happened, because the records were pretty incomplete. So some later retellings described his hands as being removed post-mortem and then shot multiple times, and then set on fire, all while still alive. Now, they also theorized that the injuries themselves carried symbolism. So the removal of his hands destroyed the instruments that organized the rebellion, and also the one that he used to work for them. The repeated gunshots would have prolonged punishment beyond immediate execution, and then burning him further transformed the killing into a spectacle, into a sign, into a show.
It was a show, 100%.
Yeah, like a warning to everybody else. It was literally a demonstration.
Yeah, of this is what's going to happen if it happens again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The violence reflected planter panic after the revolt, so like his death showed how basically scared they were. Authorities feared that Deslan had done more than organize an uprising. They kind of were thinking at this point that he had proven that enslaved workers could coordinate across plantation and challenge the system itself.
Well, it's been seen done before.
Exactly. It did. I mean, like I said, literally in Haiti. 7 years earlier, it happened. So his execution was kind of just like the cherry on top of a warning, because we already had bodies, literally heads along poles on the road. And now the leader himself became an example.
Yeah. Overkill.
Overkill, literally. My next point is the exact details may differ among some of the retellings, but The surviving descriptions consistently portray extraordinary brutality beyond punishment imposed upon many other captured rebels.
Yeah.
So, now, Deslan left behind no journal or speeches or preserved testimony in any way. Basically, we only had what other people saw happening as a way to go off of what he did.
Witness accounts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the death of Charles did not totally end the violence. Across the German coast, captured participants continued facing tribunals, execution, decapitation, and public display. So even after they killed the leader, they still continued to do this.
Okay. Again, very extreme.
Very extreme. Punishment moved from the battlefield to the landscape itself as roads, levees, and plantation quarters became instruments of intimidation for them. The public display mattered as much as the executions themselves because the planner society wanted it to be known that this was going to happen if it happened again.
Yeah.
Now, the executions did happen in several ways, and the response combined battlefield killings, summary executions, and the formal tribunals. But one of the main ways that they were executed was by firing squad. So a lot of the rebels were lined up and shot. But some of them were also hung as part of their execution. Even after the executions, like I said, they were taking their heads and putting them on poles. Now, these were like wooden stakes or pikes along levee and river road. And like I said, it stretched for miles. But in total, some accounts describe nearly 100 heads displayed by the end of January.
100?
100. Wow. So that's even more than the 95 we said had died.
Yeah.
One of the most quoted eyewitness descriptions came from Samuel Hambleton, who wrote, quote, "They were brought up here for the sake of their heads, which decorate our levee. They look like crows sitting on long poles." Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what to say, if I'm being honest with you.
I mean, it also shows, like I said, he's not like somebody to look up to in this story. He's literally a naval officer.
Yeah.
And he literally used the words, which decorate.
Yeah.
That was the part that I was like, ew.
It's
I mean, all of this, I was like, ew, but that was so dehumanizing to them.
Yes.
Now, because he was a U.S. Navy officer, it did make him significant and made, like, historians, I guess, more believe what he was writing in letters, because he would write letters to describe what he saw after the revolt. But this quote also survives because he recorded the event rather than participating in it. So he wasn't actually one of the people who participated in the authority forces going against the rebels.
Okay.
He basically sat back and watched.
Okay.
He was just in the area and just didn't participate in general.
Yeah.
But it still shows how they viewed even him, because like I said, he said, which decorate our levee. So the heads appear to have remained visible for days to weeks, because reports still reference them by the end of January.
So they were there for weeks.
They were there for weeks.
Especially in, like, Louisiana, the humidity. I mean, oh, you get into that.
Literally get into that.
Okay, well, I'll let you continue then.
So obviously there's not really records that talk about, like, the effect that this had on them. But in the humid Louisiana climate, exposed remains, especially displayed outdoors for extended periods, would have undergone visible decomp. And this would mean that there would be a lot of smells. There would be, like, different birds,
be
like,
downright
scavenging.
nasty. Yeah, it'd be downright nasty.
Which further served their quote-unquote purpose of a public terror and deterrence for this happening again.
Ew.
We also don't know the exact mounting method. A lot of places say pikes, stakes, or poles. Generally, historians believe that they were impaled or somehow fixed onto the top of sharpened wooden poles. Similar to other public warning displays used in Europe in colonial societies at the time.
Oh!
So kind of like Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler, as I mentioned earlier.
Right. Now, also, these poles were roughly 10 to 12 feet tall.
So they were like
Up
there.
there.
They were like up there.
They were visible.
Yeah.
From basically anywhere you were at.
Yeah.
Literally, the poles needed to be tall enough to be seen from river road, levees, passing traffic, but more importantly, plantation workers in their fields. Many historians think that they were likely similar to military warning pikes used elsewhere, high enough to display the head prominently. Now, there are a couple that say that the head stretched for roughly 40 miles. A couple sources.
40 miles?
40 miles.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Now, the exact distance does vary. But still. And that literally meant workers saw them, travelers saw them, planners saw them, family saw them. Like, it was all intentional.
Yes.
Now, some historians think that the displays emerged from the local planter militia response rather than a written order. Decapitation displays were already well-known methods of terror and public warning, and they were used during this period because they were intended to do more than just kill. In slave societies, especially, punishment often became a public theater designed to restore authority, intimidate others, and discourage future resistance. Kind of like, it's not quite the same, but when you were talking about the Lalaurie Mansion, and you said that the slaves who were still alive were kind of used as like a public viewing.
Yes.
They just had this very treatment of slaves as like, when something like this happened, it was like a public spectacle.
Yes.
There are a few other examples of other rebellions doing the same thing. So the Stono Rebellion was the largest slave uprising in the British American colonies, and that took place on September 9th, 1739, in South Carolina. It was led by an enslaved man named Jemmy, and around 80 enslaved Africans took up arms and marched towards Spanish Florida to seek freedom. But they did fight locally before the revolt was brutally crushed. After the rebellion, participants were executed and heads were also displayed as warnings. Colonial South Carolina used public body displays and decapitation to deter future revolts. Now, for the Stono Rebellion, roughly 20 to 25 white colonists were killed, and around 30 to 50 enslaved rebels were killed during the suppression. But they also displayed their heads the same way. Tacky's War was one of the most significant slave uprising in the British West Indies prior to the Haitian Revolution. British authorities executed participants and also displayed their heads publicly after the suppression.
So this was just something that was frequently done amongst, shall I say, like other cultures or other
Well, the first one that happened in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So it's just basically how people viewed slaves and what they used as a public warning to basically try to be like, don't do this again because this is what happened.
Yeah.
During the Tacky's War, hundreds died during the suppression. Estimates sometimes range between 60 to 100 and more rebels that were killed.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Although heads were displayed during this, there's not really a confirmed count of how many. There's no, so many miles were lined with them or whatever like that. During the Haitian Revolution, which we talked about, both colonial authorities and revolutionary forces used public body displays during different phases of the conflict. Deaths overall estimated that there was over 100,000 formerly enslaved people who died, and 24,000 Europeans.
Wow, that's a lot.
Right. Possibly 200 to 350,000 total deaths, depending on the estimate. This one, there are reports of there being body displays in some case, but there's no documented of specifically that somebody put somebody's head on a pike type of situation.
Yeah.
In the Nat Turner's Rebellion, which took place in Southampton County, Virginia in August of 1831, this was one of the deadliest and most successful enslaved uprisings in U.S. history. Led by an enslaved preacher named Nat Turner, the 2-day revolt resulted in the deaths of roughly 55 to 60 white people. The rebellion deeply shook the white South and led to harsh new laws that restricted the lives of Black Americans. Participants were executed and bubblies. That was not bodies publicly, and it just
Bubblies.
bubblies.
You paused and I started moving positions and then you started. So I just had to hang there for a second.
I look over, I'm in the middle of a sentence and I happen to look up and Scoot's like leaning back, one arm on the back of her chair, legs in the air because she was trying to swing herself. And I started talking and she didn't want to make noise.
I didn't want to make any noise, so I just kind of had to stop midair.
But I like looked over and it was like, pay me like one of your French girls. And I was like, whoa. Oh, hang on. I gotta find my place again.
Gotta lock in.
Gotta lock in. Participants were executed and bodies publicly handled as a deterrence once again. Though the German coast display remains among the most visually striking examples.
I could see why.
Exactly.
I could see why 100%.
Right. Now, for Nat Turner's rebellion, about 55 to 65 white people were killed, and around 55 enslaved people were executed or killed. Now, once again, this also did have public display of bodies in some way, but it was not the same scale as the German Coast Uprising.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's probably the worst one I think you've given.
40 miles, roughly. The violence following the German Coast Uprising did also not end even when the execution stopped. For the enslaved population of Louisiana, the aftermath continued long after the final shots had been fired. Workers returned to the same fields where the uprising had begun, sugar still required planting, cane still required cutting, mills still turned and boiling houses still burned, plantation life resumed like it had never changed. But the landscape itself did change. Roads and levees that once served trade and transportation were now a place of warning and memory for these people. I mean, imagine that you see that you're going back to your job, your work, quote unquote, but every time you pass this road, all you can think about is the 40 miles of decapitated heads of people that you probably knew.
Yeah.
Or in some capacity, I get that they weren't all from the same plantation, but some of them were. Like,
that you had some form of connection to.
Yeah. Yep. Or even just you knew what they represented.
Yeah.
Where was I? I'm getting all worked up. I'm losing my place in my notes. Now, travelers moving through the Mississippi River corridor encountered the remains of the suppression directly, as they literally still, like, we don't know when the heads actually came down, if they even did, or if they just let them stay up until they weren't there anymore.
Wow.
Right.
So we don't know if they ever actually technically removed them, or if they just let them rot there until...
Yep. Yeah, there's no real accounts of what happened.
Oh.
We know for a fact that they were still there by the end of January, and remember, this happened in early January. So they were there for at least a month for sure. Mm-hmm.
Ew.
Yep.
That's nasty.
Right. The psychological effects of that alone.
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
Enslaved workers,
enslaved and just normal people. I couldn't imagine just...
Right.
Let's just say you've traveled to Louisiana for whatever, and you're going down, and all of a sudden you see these pike heads.
Yep.
Like, what?
And what's even more frustrating is, we don't know the type of, effect this had on enslaved workers, because we don't get to hear their voices.
No. Yeah.
And so it's even historians are trying to piece together what happened, but we only have one side of the story.
Yeah.
Which actually, that was my next point. Plantation records documented production, labor, and punishment more readily than the grief, trauma, or mourning, or just overall any effect that this had. But the human cost was immense. I mean, families lost fathers, wives lost husbands, children lost parents. It was entire plantation communities that were disrupted within days.
Yeah, just lives lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Many victims disappeared entirely into the tribunal records and execution lists, and others survived only as numbers. Basically, they don't have a name. We just have that something happened to someone. The response to the uprising reshaped plantation behavior throughout Louisiana. Surveillance increased, movement restrictions tightened, gatherings drew greater suspicion. So, once again, they saw this rebellion as we need to come back harder on them.
Yeah.
Any communication between plantations worried authorities, and even music and drumming, which were already viewed anxiously because I believe that in Haiti, they used it as a form of communication. And so now...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now in Louisiana, they view any type of music
As bad.
as bad because in Haiti, they used it to coordinate their positions and movements and things like that. So the memory of the Haitian Revolution already haunted the Louisiana slaveholders. But now the German Coast Uprising transformed those fears into an experience. And now they were just like, once again, coming back even harder, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you literally have an example of basically what not to do, and instead you're like, we're going to do it twofold. It's like, okay. And then you're like, oh my God, they're rebelling against us? Why?
I know.
It's like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Although historians have not identified clear statistical evidence showing measurable increase in deaths immediately after the uprising, there are some evidence that suggests the system itself remained unchanged. Louisiana sugar parishes already suffered unusually high mortality rates where deaths frequently happened, and so the labor conditions continued to produce that outcome. Like, nothing changed after this, which is also insane to me. Like,
I'm not surprised though.
Right. I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised. Like,
fair enough.
It makes sense because, like, we know at least some of the history that have happened, but it still is an insane concept. Now, because the systems remained largely unchanged, the contradiction at the center of the plantation society also survived. Plantation owners depended entirely upon enslaved labor while simultaneously fearing the people who sustained their wealth. The uprising demonstrated that enslaved workers could organize across plantations, communicate, recruit, and challenge the system directly. The response exposed something equally important: the fragility of planter authority, because it literally showed that easily the enslaved workers could outnumber white authority at any minute. So all of this, like the public execution and displaying their heads and stuff, they were not signs of confidence, but literally of fear, like I've been saying.
Yeah.
Their power felt threatened, and so it was answered with a show, a demonstration. But ironically, the violence that was intended to kind of erase the uprising helped preserve it, because more than 2 centuries later, historians still reconstruct tribunal records and try to trace back where the displays stood, and they're working on recovering names from any archives that they can. Even with that, though, despite being the largest slave uprising in the United States history, the German Coast Uprising disappeared from mainstream American memory for generations. There are no major national memorials, no annual commemorations, and very little presence in any textbooks or history books in any way.
Which is really bizarre to me.
Right. The rebellion that had terrified Louisiana's plantation system and triggered one of the most brutal responses to slave resistance in early America slowly faded from public awareness. This absence becomes even more striking when compared to the other acts of resistance, like Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831, which remains widely recognized despite involving fewer participants. The German Coast Uprising still remains largely unknown outside of regional scholarship. Even many discussions of slavery in Louisiana historically focused more on the plantations and economics and architecture rather than their organized resistance within there. Part of this erasure came from the records themselves, and most of those sources talked about details like property loss and the militia mobilization and restoring order, in quotes, instead of what actually happened.
Yeah, not like the actual facts.
Yes, far less attention was given to the actual motives that happened, the experiences, or the voices of the enslaved themselves. We quite literally are hearing about the rebellion from the people who quote-unquote defeated it.
Yeah.
And historical memory often follows the power, because power preserves itself. And so a lot of historical memory comes from power because they're the people who can tell the history, because they have the power to do so.
Yes.
So for decades, the uprising was often described as a disturbance or insurrection or a local event.
I don't...
Right. Rather than what it was, which was
a rebellion.
A rebellion, a resistance movement. And the scale of the rebellion, the planning involved in the broader political context, like connected to Haiti and Louisiana sugar expansion, received even less attention. So it was like all just being brushed under the rug as like a disturbance? You put people's heads on fucking pikes.
Had it on pikes, yeah, for miles.
For miles. But the uprising also kind of brought to light some more flaws of the United States.
Well.
Well.
Yeah.
The United States often presents its early history through the language of liberty and independence. And the German Coast Uprising exposed a contradiction to that. Just baseline. It obviously showed that that's not how things were.
Yeah.
Louisiana's growing prosperity depended upon slavery, and the wealth of the sugar industry rested upon forced labor. Plantation fortunes emerged from exhaustion, injury, punishment, and death. The revolt forced recognition that enslaved people were not passive participants in the system, but active resistors, and even more so that they were willing to do something about it. The physical landscape did contribute to the forgetting as well, because what survived was the plantation houses, architecture, and the sugar wealth. Baseline, this is blunt, but like the bodies of the rebels did not.
Yeah.
What we still have to show for it is the wealth that people gained, and we know that the wealth controls everything. I mean, names vanished, like we said, which thankfully people are trying to find some of them where they can, which is great. But it began slowly. I mean, modern historian, museums, and archaeologists, and even public history projects started to revisit the uprising during the late 20th century and early 21st centuries. So this is like 200 years later.
I was ready to say, that's in not more recent, but like...
pretty recent, yeah.
Fairly recent.
Like, I've been alive.
Yeah.
For a good chunk of that.
Yeah.
They're also revisiting plantation archives and re-examining tutorial correspondence. Daniel Rasmussen, he wrote American Uprising, The Untold Story of America's Largest Slave Revolt. And that did bring broader public attention to the event and help restore Charles Deslan and the rebels to historical discussion. Public remembrance expand further throughout reenactments, memorial projects, and artistic interpretation. In 2019, artist Dred Scott organized a large-scale reenactment of the German Coast March in Louisiana. Participants even carried period tools, drums, banners, and recreated elements of the original movement. The event returned the uprising to the landscape where it occurred and, symbolically, I guess, reversed the silence that was happening.
To bring their voices back. More than 2 centuries later, the German Coast Uprising increasingly stands not as a forgotten regional incident, but as one of the defining acts of resistance in the history of American slavery. It shows how they organized, they fought, they marched, and even after the executions and the attempted silence, their story is still being told and is now gaining light again. And that wraps up the German Coast Uprising. That was crazy. I never heard of that before.
I did not either.
Wow.
Yeah, which is crazy because, like growing up too, like, history was one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, same here.
And so it's like, the fact that, not that I think I know everything about history, but the fact that I haven't even heard about it is kind of like, damn.
Yeah.
Dracula, putting heads on pikes. 2026.
2026. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And if you thought this was interesting, share it with your friends. Share it with your mother.
Share it with your mother.
Catch us on Sunday for our next episode.
Well, don't go too far because we'll catch you in the next investigation. Bye.
Bye.